What happens when mockery meets the divine? When a hardened prison guard laughed at an inmate's prayers to the Virgin Mary, he thought faith was just another weakness. But in the darkness that followed, he would discover that some powers transcend prison walls, and some prayers echo in places we can't even imagine. Before we continue, leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I really want to see how far these powerful stories are reaching. The rain hammered against the windows of Coldwater maximum security prison like bullets from heaven. Each drop a reminder that even nature seemed angry at this forsaken place. Marcus Thompson had been a guard there for 15 years, and in all that time, he'd never seen anything that made him believe in miracles or divine intervention. The concrete walls, the steel bars, the endless gray corridors, they had long ago stripped away any romantic notions about redemption or salvation. To Marcus, inmates were numbers, problems to be managed, threats to be contained. Nothing more. It was a Thursday evening in November when everything changed. Marcus was doing his rounds in cell Block D, the section reserved for lifers and those society had given up on. The fluorescent lights hummed their eternal tune, casting harsh shadows that made every face look guilty of something. As he passed cell 47, he heard something that made him stop. It was singing. No, not singing exactly. It was prayer, soft and melodic, in Spanish. Inside the cell, kneeling on the cold concrete floor, was Miguel Santos. The old man had been there for 23 years, convicted of a crime he swore he didn't commit. His gray hair fell over his weathered face as he held a small, worn picture of the Virgin Mary in his trembling hands. The image was so faded you could barely make out the features, but Miguel clutched it like it was made of gold. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Miguel whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. Dominus tecum. Marcus felt something rise in his chest. Not sympathy, but irritation. He'd seen this act before. Inmates finding religion when the walls close in, pretending to be reformed, hoping for early release or special treatment. It was all a game, and Marcus wasn't playing. He banged his baton against the bars. Hey, Santos. Lights out was 10 minutes ago. Save the theater for the parole board. Miguel didn't stop. His eyes remained closed, tears streaming down his cheeks as he continued his prayer. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus. I said, knock it off. Marcus's voice echoed through the block. Other inmates stirred in their cells, some pressing against their bars to see what was happening. Miguel finally opened his eyes and looked at Marcus. There was something in that gaze, not defiance, not fear, but a kind of profound sadness mixed with unshakable faith. I pray for my daughter, he said quietly. She is sick, very sick. The doctors say she has weeks, maybe days. This prayer, it is all I can give her now. Marcus laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was sharp, cynical, the laugh of a man who'd heard every sob story and excuse in the book. Your daughter? Santos, you haven't had a visitor in 5 years. Stop with the stories. She cannot come, Miguel said, rising slowly to his feet. His knees creaked from the cold floor. She is in the hospital, fighting for her life. But the Virgin Mary, she hears me. She will protect my Rosa. The Virgin Mary? Marcus's laughter grew louder, more mocking. Several other guards had gathered now, drawn by the commotion. You think some imaginary woman in the sky is going to help you? You killed a man, Santos. Where was your Virgin Mary then? I did not kill anyone, Miguel said, his voice steady despite the tears. And yes, I believe she hears me. I believe she sees the truth. Marcus shook his head, still chuckling. You're pathetic, old man. 23 years in here, and you're still playing make-believe. There's no Virgin Mary. There's no God. There's just these walls and the time you got left to rot between them. What happened next would be debated, investigated, and whispered about in Coldwater Prison for years to come. As the last word left Marcus's mouth, every light in cell block D went out. Not flickered, when completely dead. The emergency lights, the exit signs, even the red dots on the security cameras. Everything plunged into absolute darkness. The silence lasted maybe 2 seconds before chaos erupted. Inmates shouted, banged on their bars, called out in confusion and fear. Guards fumbled for their flashlights, their radios crackling with urgent calls. But Marcus stood frozen in the pitch black, because in that moment of absolute darkness, he saw something impossible. A soft, golden light emanated from cell 47, not from any bulb or fixture, but from the air itself, surrounding Miguel as he knelt again, still praying. The light was warm, gentle, and in it, Marcus could see the outline of a figure standing behind Miguel, a woman in flowing robes, her hand resting on the old man's shoulder. Marcus's flashlight fell from his trembling hand, clattering on the concrete floor. He wanted to run, to scream, to do something, but he was paralyzed. The figure turned toward him, and though her face was obscured by the light, he felt her looking directly into his soul. In that gaze, he felt every cruel word he'd spoken, every moment of callousness, every time he'd chosen cynicism over compassion. Then, as suddenly as they'd gone out, the lights blazed back to life. The golden glow vanished. The figure was gone. Miguel remained kneeling, apparently unaware of what had just transpired, still clutching his faded picture and praying. Marcus stumbled backward, his heart racing. The other guards were asking him questions, checking if he was okay, but their voices seemed to come from very far away. He mumbled something about needing air and practically ran from the cell block. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that figure, felt that penetrating gaze. He tried to rationalize it. Stress, hallucination, maybe something in the ventilation system. But deep down, he knew what he'd seen was real. The next morning, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in 30 years. He went to the prison chapel. It was empty except for Father Joseph, the elderly chaplain who'd been ministering to inmates since before Marcus started working there. Marcus. Father Joseph looked surprised. I don't think I've ever seen you in here. Marcus sat down heavily in a pew, his hands shaking. Father, I need to tell you something. About Santos in cell 47. Father Joseph's expression grew serious. Miguel? Has something happened? Marcus told him everything. The prayer, his mockery, the lights, the figure. Father Joseph listened without interrupting, his weathered hands folded in his lap. I know how this sounds, Marcus finished. I know you probably think I'm crazy. I don't think you're crazy, Father Joseph said quietly. Miguel is a special soul. I've known him for many years. He maintains his innocence, you know. They all do, Marcus said automatically, then caught himself. I mean, no, but Miguel is different. He's never wavered, never changed his story. And his faith? I've seen hardened killers find God in here, Marcus, but it's usually born of desperation or manipulation. Miguel's faith is pure. It sustained him to the death of his wife, through 23 years of imprisonment for a crime he says he didn't commit, and now through his daughter's illness. His daughter? She's really sick? Father Joseph nodded gravely. Rosa Santos, 28 years old, brain tumor. She was 5 when Miguel was arrested, grew up without her father, always believed in his innocence. She's at St. Mary's Hospital, in critical condition. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. For 15 years, he'd treated every sad story as a lie, every claim of innocence as manipulation. But what if... I need to see him, Marcus said suddenly. I need to apologize. Father Joseph smiled sadly. I'm afraid that's not possible. Miguel was transferred to the medical wing this morning. He collapsed during breakfast. The doctors think it's his heart. Marcus ran to the medical wing, his heavy boots echoing through the corridors. He found Miguel in a small room, hooked up to monitors, his breathing shallow. The old man's eyes were closed, but his lips were moving slightly, still praying. Santos, Marcus said, pulling a chair close to the bed. Miguel, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I said. Miguel's eyes fluttered open. He looked at Marcus with that same profound sadness mixed with peace. You saw her, he whispered. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded, tears he hadn't shed in 20 years burning his eyes. I saw her. I don't understand it, but I saw her. She came for you, Miguel said weakly. Not for me. I already believe. But you needed to see. But why? Why would she? Because everyone deserves grace, Miguel whispered. Even those who mock. Even those who doubt. Especially them. Marcus gripped the old man's hand. Tell me about Rosa. Tell me about your daughter. For the next hour, Miguel spoke about his daughter. Her first steps, her love of butterflies, how she'd insisted on visiting him every week until the state moved him to this maximum security facility too far for her to travel regularly. He talked about the crime he didn't commit, the man who died, the witness who'd lied. Marcus listened, really listened, for the first time in years. That afternoon, Marcus did something that could have cost him his job. He called St. Mary's Hospital and asked to speak to Rosa Santos. When they said she couldn't come to the phone, he asked if he could relay a message. He told them he was calling on behalf of her father, that Miguel loved her, was praying for her, and that she should never doubt his innocence. The nurse on the other end was quiet for a moment, then said, "Sir, I don't know who you are, but Rosa just opened her eyes for the first time in 3 days. The doctors, they can't explain it." Marcus hung up the phone and returned to Miguel's bedside. The old man was sleeping peacefully, the picture of the Virgin Mary still clutched in his hand. Marcus sat with him through his shift and then through the next shift, refusing to leave. 3 days later, 2 miracles occurred. First, Rosa Santos made a recovery that her doctors called medically impossible. The tumor had shrunk to less than a quarter of its size, and she was walking, talking, laughing. Second, a man named Thomas Garrett walked into a police station 200 miles away and confessed to the murder Miguel had been imprisoned for. He was dying of cancer, he said, and couldn't face his maker with that weight on his soul. He provided details only the real killer would know. Miguel was released 2 weeks later, on a cold December morning. Marcus was there, off duty, standing in the parking lot as the old man walked free for the first time in 23 years. Rosa was there too, still weak but radiant, running into her father's arms. Before getting into his daughter's car, Miguel walked over to Marcus. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what? I mocked you. I was cruel. You gave me the chance to show my faith when it mattered most," Miguel said. "And you listened when it counted. The Virgin Mary works through all of us, even those who don't believe, especially those who are learning to believe." As their car drove away, Marcus stood in the cold parking lot, watching until they disappeared. That night, he submitted his resignation from Coldwater Prison. He couldn't work in a place where he'd lost his ability to see the humanity in others. Instead, he started volunteering at a program that helped families visit incarcerated loved ones, ensuring that no one else would go 5 years without seeing their family due to distance or cost. He also started attending Mass, sitting in the back row, still uncertain but open. Sometimes, when the lights were dim and the candles flickered, he thought he could feel that presence again, warm, forgiving, patient. He never saw the figure again, but he didn't need to. The memory of that moment in the darkness, when his mockery met divine love, had changed him forever. A year later, Marcus received a letter from Miguel. Inside was a new picture of the Virgin Mary, along with a photo of Rosa on her wedding day, radiant and healthy. The note simply said, "She still hears our prayers." All of them, even the ones we don't know we're making. Marcus framed both pictures and kept them on his desk at the rehabilitation center where he now worked, helping former inmates rebuild their lives. Whenever someone asked about them, he would tell them about the night the lights went out at Coldwater Prison, and how sometimes the greatest darkness is needed to reveal the most brilliant light. The other guards who were there that night never spoke publicly about what happened. But sometimes late at night when cell block D was quiet, they would remember the absolute darkness, the strange silence, and some swore they too had seen something in that darkness, a glimpse of something beyond the concrete and steel, beyond the cynicism and routine, something that suggested that even in the most forsaken places, grace could find a way to shine through. Miguel and Rosa moved to a small town near the mountains, where Miguel opened a small shop repairing watches, his skilled hands finally free to create rather than simply endure. Every Sunday, they attended the local church together, and Miguel would light a candle for Marcus Thompson, the prison guard whose mockery had become the catalyst for a miracle, whose disbelief had opened the door for belief, whose darkness had been necessary for the light to shine through. And in that small church, beneath a stained glass window depicting the Virgin Mary, Miguel would sometimes tell a story to those who needed to hear it. Not as a tale of vengeance or vindication, but as a reminder that faith isn't about forcing others to believe. It's about holding on to your own light even when surrounded by darkness, trusting that somehow, in ways we cannot foresee, that light will find the ones who need it most. The investigation into the power outage at Coldwater Prison never found a cause. The electrical systems were intact. The backup generators had simply stopped working for those few minutes, and then started again without any intervention. It was filed away as an anomaly, an unexplained incident in a place full of unexplained incidents. But for those who were there, who stood in that impossible darkness and witnessed what came after, it was filed away in their hearts as something else entirely. A moment when the veil between the possible and impossible grew thin, when prayer became power, and when a mocking laugh was transformed into a cry for grace. If you were moved by this incredible story of faith and transformation, the next video appearing on your screen tells another amazing tale that will touch your heart. Click now to discover how a single act of kindness changed everything for someone who had lost all hope.